Oh, with Kamala Harris now the presidential nominee for the Democrats are experiencing a sugar high. But Democrats are mistaking that sugar high for Kamala Harris being an actually good and effective candidate. But Kamala Harris is not, in fact, a dead person, so that obviously is going to help her. Democrats were wildly unenthusiastic about their candidate, and you could feel it. The media going out of their way to erase all the truths about Kamala Harris. Even with that, Kamala Harris is still not leading in the polls. According to Decision Desk HQ, which is an excellent aggregator of polls, you are seeing, of course, a massive impact on her approval rating. So the Olympics, the opener happened over the weekend. Obviously, it's taking place in Paris, France. Except everybody in the Last Supper painting was queer or trans. It created, obviously, an enormous amount of backlash at the opener of the Olympics. Oh, with Kamala Harris now the presidential nominee for the Democrats are experiencing a sugar high. That sugar high is coming from the fact that Joe Biden is, in fact, not the nominee. But Democrats are mistaking that sugar high for Kamala Harris being an actually good and effective candidate. Now, the polls have tightened pretty dramatically, and that is, again, because Joe Biden is no longer in the race. But Kamala Harris is not, in fact, a dead person, so that obviously is going to help her. It also means that a lot of the Democratic enthusiasm problems have gone away. Democrats were wildly unenthusiastic about their candidate, and you could feel it. It was palpable. If you have hung around Democrats, you could see they were depressed going into the election. The last thing you want is for your crowd to be depressed going into an election cycle. That depression appears to be over. The media going out of their way to erase all the truths about Kamala Harris. Even with that, Kamala Harris is still not leading in the polls. According to Decision Desk HQ, which is an excellent aggregator of polls, they find, for example, in Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump still has about a 2.5 point lead on Kamala Harris. And that is a minor decrease since the week before. In other words, the polls, Democrat versus Republican, continue to be quite durable in favor of Donald Trump, although, again, those margins are very, very narrow. And you're going to get another 3 weeks of solid coverage of Kamala Harris where the media basically just massage her. She's going to pick a vice presidential candidate sometime in the next couple of weeks. You're going to get the Democratic convention that is happening the third week of August. So it's going to be a nice 3 weeks for Kamala Harris, and then the bump is going to be over. Okay, well, again, that enthusiasm is likely to wear off as the sort of varnish on Kamala Harris' candidacy starts to wear off. The fact is that Kamala Harris is a bad candidate. She was a bad candidate in 2019. She's a bad candidate in 2020. And she is, in fact, a bad candidate in 2024. This is about Democrats slandering J.D. Vance as weird in order to avoid the consequence of the fact that they picked a very weird vice president in 2020 who is now their presidential candidate. So over the last 2 days, according to Tom Elliott, founder of Grabien, CNN and MSNBC have suggested that J.D. Vance is weird more than 150 times in 2 days. Right? The Democratic media complex rides again. You know, they are all in coordination, and you can sense the joie de vivre in the media. The media are overjoyed. They hate Donald Trump. They hate J.D. Vance. But we still have to cover the fact that Joe Biden is senile. So they forced Joe Biden out of the race. And now they're back in their comfort place.
I think Donald Trump, I know him. And he's probably sitting and watching the TV. And every day, Vance, it comes out, Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic. And I'll bet President Trump is sitting there, scratching his head and wondering, why did I pick this guy?
Jen Psaki, who went directly from being the press secretary for Joe Biden to being the press secretary for Kamala Harris, but working for MSNBC, she also says that J.D. Vance is weird.
Kamala Harris in so many ways might just be the right candidate at the right time. The right candidate for this century, by the way. She might be the right candidate to tell the country that actually we don't have to go back. To tell the country that actually back wasn't so great for lots of Americans and that we can go forward instead. Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate and the Republican apparatus behind them will regroup. They will throw everything. It's going to be gross, misogynistic, sexist, racist, all of the things.
So this is the candidacy they're going to try and run, is that if you point out that Kamala Harris is, in fact, both weird on policy and personally, this means that you're a racist and a sexist, and the actual weirdo is the perfectly normal guy from Ohio who's married with kids and goes to Catholic church. That and believes in traditional family and thinks that it's actually kind of a big social issue if people aren't having kids.
I mean, they really are. The things that they stand for. Donald Trump, of course, is afraid of windmills, and he talks about all kinds of crazy stuff. I think he apologized to cats, but he hasn't apologized to women.
Okay, again, the idea here is this is all projection, because it's true that there is a weird position with regard to having children or not having children as a society. And there is a weird position with regard to traditional family versus alternative lifestyles. It turns out that all functioning societies are rooted in a traditional family structure that is built around having kids. That is utterly uncontroversial. If it's controversial to you, then you probably should look at your priors. Every society is rooted in the little platoons represented by families. And those families have to be built for the future, or the society doesn't have a future. So, the Olympics, the opener happened over the weekend. Obviously, it's taking place in Paris, France. And the big sort of high-profile thing that happened in the opener of the Olympics is very weird. That was the Last Supper. It was the Last Supper, inspired Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting, except everybody in the Last Supper painting was queer or trans. It was deliberately an insult to Christians all over the world. And then they float on in Dionysius, who is the Greek god of wine, except he's like a fat smurf on a cornucopia of flowers to sing to you. It created obviously an enormous amount of backlash at the opener of the Olympics. So, welcome to the weird West. That's pretty weird. Well, if you look at France as sort of the bleeding edge of the cultural West, then what you see is that France, like pretty much every other country in Europe, as well as the United States, has an aging population with very few babies. Right? France's population increase has basically stalled out. Right now, the fertility rate in France has dropped down to 1.68 children per woman compared to 1.79 in 2022. That is down from about 2 in 2013. The average age of mothers in France has been rising steadily over the same period. It currently stands at 31, okay, which is pretty old in terms of like the average age of having your first kid. Not only that, religious practice in France, of course, has gone completely by the wayside. In 2019-2020, according to one study in NC, 2019-2020, 51% of the population aged 18 to 59 in metropolitan France said they had no religion. No religion. While Catholicism remains the dominant religion, 29% of the population says that they are Catholic. Islam comes in second at 10%. The frequency and intensity of religious practice, however, varies by religious affiliation. Only 8% of those Catholics regularly attend a place of worship, compared to just over 20% of other Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. 91% of people raised in a Muslim family follow the religion of their parents. Only 67% of Catholics follow the religion of their parents. So religion is falling away. And as it turns out, the prediction is that by about 2050, 20% of the population of France is going to be Muslim. A Republican presidential candidate saying perhaps we should have tax incentives in order to get people to have more kids. Not super weird. Saying that, it's actually a benefit of society for people to have kids. We should make it easier for people to have kids in the United States. Kamala Harris's campaign is built around this alternative moral structure in which we are supposed to be not only apathetic, but somewhat disdainful of religion, Christianity, traditional family. Like that is real about Kamala Harris. Her entire campaign is now being run along the same lines, not as Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, which is the one everybody's all enthusiastic about. We're going to unite America, right? There's no red states. There's no blue states. There's just the United States. No black, no white, just American. Meanwhile, again, there is something weird about dividing the American population by race, ethnicity, gender. That's exactly what the Kamala Harris campaign is doing. So according to Reuters, more than 160,000 people joined the White Women for Kamala Harris Zoom call. This was, I'm not even kidding you. So on the Zoom call, they were legitimately apologizing for who they were while pushing Kamala Harris. Which, if this makes you feel better, ladies, I got to tell you, I think there's something deeper going on that's more of a problem. Here was Ariel Fodor, a member of White Women for Kamala. Again, it's so weird. Can you imagine white men for Trump? This is precisely what they're doing because, again, the 2012 Barack Obama theory of politics was cobbled together a bunch of upper-class white ladies and a bunch of intersectional minorities. It's weird to say that you have to use your white privilege to you can't correct somebody who's of a race that has more melanin in their skin. Stop with your corrections. You have to use your privilege to help the poor, impoverished black people. Like, it's so weird. There was, July 25th, a Zoom call for black, gay, and queer men for Harris. Like, it's weird. Like, this is what America's about? Dividing everybody up by black, queer, and gay men for Harris, white women For Harris, the biggest problem, honestly, with Kamala Harris's candidacy, aside from the fact she's personally weird, aside from the fact she believes weird stuff, is the fact, again, she is wildly dishonest. According to a new poll, 92% of Americans believe that Kamala Harris was involved in the cover-up of Joe Biden's health to at least some degree. And among the questions asked by this new YouGov survey, respondents were asked if Biden was unfairly pressured to drop out. 48% no, 32% yes. So rewriting Kamala Harris means pretending that she is not, in fact, radical, and also that she both did many things as vice president and also had no responsibilities and never did anything as vice president.
I think she needs to continue putting together her vision for the future.
She's going to come back to earth because it turns out that sugar highs wear off. And when they wear off, turns out that people go back to their rational mind, and she's not a good candidate. Donald Trump also pointed out to over the weekend, Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese terror group that is effectively an Iranian proxy group. They've been firing missiles consistently into Israel, rockets and missiles into Israel for almost a year. At this point, Israel has not responded in any sort of severe way. Hezbollah fired a missile and it killed all these kids in a town called Majd al-Shams, near the Syrian and Lebanese border. And Donald Trump pointed out that Hezbollah has been on the offense because the Biden administration is weak, which is 100% true. Kamala Harris, she waited for about 24 hours to put out a statement on the murder of these Druze kids. Again, not Jewish, Muslim kids. And she said, quote, Israel continues to face severe threats to its security. Harris's support for Israel's security is ironclad. This came from her national security advisor, Phil Gordon. She's made no direct statement. Quote, the U.S. will continue working on a diplomatic solution to end all attacks once and for all. So the New York Times headline on this murder of the 12 Druze kids, quote, fears of escalation after rocket from Lebanon hits soccer field. Oh, is that fears of escalation? And then the picture is of a bunch of coffins of Druze kids who were killed by Hezbollah. The word Hezbollah does not appear in the headline. And the word Iran does not appear in the headline. The word terror attack does not appear in the headline. He put out a statement saying, quote, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel had a terrible, insulting meeting in D.C. with Kamala Harris, who also refused to preside over Congress during his speech, which is an obligation of the VP. Her ineptness will greatly prolong the war and delay the hostage release. The same people that embarrassed us in Afghanistan with their gross incompetence are the ones who are telling Israel not to fight any longer with Hamas. Vote Trump 2024, make America great again. We'll get to more Biden administration failure this time from